So if we do roll the clock back 20 years to when you first started out, what was it that first got you into football? What were your first memories of football?
My first memories of football, I guess, is in the back garden. I think ever since I could walk, I was probably kicking a ball, and I was very lucky to have a very supportive family. But my dad was obviously a pivotal part in me getting to where I did. So I think my earliest memories is probably in the back garden, kicking the ball about, 4 and 5. As I got a little bit older, a younger brother who also went on to have a half decent stint at a professional club. We would always play together, and that for me developing that was really advantageous because we would spend hours and hours, just me and him, playing in the back garden. He was a goalkeeper, so I used to get to have loads of shots. So that was a big part of it, that like informal play type stuff. And I suppose that transferred out into the streets where we used to play in the road, dodging cars, using drains as goalposts, playing on the back field. We used to play like our street against the next street along on the back field. We'd put sticks in for posts. There was a big hill on the pitch. We would play for hours and hours and hours. The scores would be like 185 or whatever. You kind of just make it up, but that was part of it. We just wanted to play all the time. And then from there, I guess around 6, 7, I maybe got into more organised football at the local grassroots team. But at the time, I remember, I was 2 years younger than the team I was playing in, just because the structure wasn't properly in place. So when I first went into more organised grassroots stuff, it was still 11 aside for like the under 8s and these massive goals, and so it was a bit bizarre when I look back and think, well, what were we playing 11v11 on this massive pitch with these massive goals, which doesn't make sense now. And then I think at about 9, I moved on to play for a team called West End Juniors, which was close to where I was living, and that was when mini soccer came about. So my first real season of football was the first year of mini soccer. We had a great little team at that age, and we went on to win the league. Travelled around England as you do, playing in those tournaments. Really great memories of just like loving football, of really loving it. And at that point, I would say I was decent. Mm-hmm. Probably had a really good understanding of the game for my age. Technically was okay, but physically I was like the little fatty on the team. So I was like a little bit heavy. So probably never caught the eye for that reason. If anyone who watched us play probably thought, he's all right, but he doesn't really get it on the pitch, does he? So it wasn't until I turned like 11 and 12 where I started to slim out a little bit. It probably goes back to the point of people developing at different ages. So my body started to change around 11 and 12. Started to really like catch the eye of a few clubs who were out and about looking for players. And then at that point I moved on to a team called Walker Central, which had a reputation for getting players to Newcastle. Yeah. So like at the time everyone thought, he's only going to play for Walker because he wants to go to Newcastle, and like lo and behold that's kind of what happened. So at 12, maybe 12 and a half, 13, I was lucky enough to be scouted by Newcastle amongst other clubs. And then around Christmas of that year, they basically said, look, sign and commit to Newcastle, that you can finish playing your season at Walker Central. So that's what I did. And like at the time, going right back to that 5-year-old playing in the garden, the dream was always to play for Newcastle. Like, regardless, that was, you were Shearer, you were whoever else, Rob Lee, Peter Beardsley, like you were all these people in the back garden, and actually to be given the opportunity to be part of a system which could potentially lead to get the opportunity to get out at St James's and play was the dream. So when that opportunity came up, it was a no-brainer for me. Went into the academy system at 12, 13, and looking back on it, I loved it. It became the norm for me. So like training 3 times a week, playing at the weekend was brilliant. had some great coaches, some people who are, you know, modelling myself on a little bit now. I've taken bits from and thought, you know, well, I really like that about him. Actually, I'm going to bring that to me and, you know, try and help the players the same way that person helped me. So went through the ranks, you know, playing at professional clubs. We went all the way around Europe and some great tournaments, some incredible memories. Developed skills that were, you know, stood us in good stead for the rest of my life. And then at 16, I remember being at school, and I got a text off my dad. Basically, it was like, it would have been GCSE year, so it was around about like the April time of an under 16. And dad texted us saying Newcastle have offered you a 2-year contract. I was thinking, well, how does he know? So basically, he received a letter and opened it, and that's what it said. So like, I was at school with the biggest smile on my face you can possibly imagine. And then in the July of that year, I went in full time as an apprentice for 2 years. And like I said, at the time, it was just normal for me.
Yeah.
But I suppose it came with an element of like social status. So at school, I probably wasn't known as, you know, Mark. I was known as the kid who played for Newcastle. So like going into that, it took us away from, you know, my school friends into a different environment. But that's still that like social expectation, that social status was still there. Time as an apprentice, in the moment thinking back, I probably did feel quite a bit of pressure. Being in that sort of position.
Where did that pressure come from?
I suppose it was a mix of things. I think it's inevitable being in that environment where it's so competitive and the stakes are so high that you put pressure on yourself. You're also under an element of social scrutiny. So people want to know how you're doing. You don't want to rock up and play in an 18s game where your mates come and watch and then you rubbish. Because then it starts, you know, rumour mill going around. What's he doing playing for Newcastle? He's never going to be a pro and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I guess it came from a mix of those things. I was always quite like a nervous type of player. Like I would be bothered about what other people thought of us. And that's probably one of my major regrets. I worried too much about how I was perceived. And as I went through the ranks and, you know, played in the reserve team, I would be scared of making a mistake because I didn't want to get a verbal volley off one of the more experienced players. So I probably limited my game a lot. I kept things really simple because I didn't want to, you know, try and play a 50-yard dive in case I went in the stands. Like that just like put us off a little bit.
So playing within yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And like that was probably even more the case as I moved into, you know, training a little bit in and around the first team. You go and, you know, at the time I was playing right back and like I'd be training against Charles and Zogbia or whoever it may be, sharing a changing rooms on the odd occasion with like Michael Owen and the likes. And yeah, very within myself. Never really got to the point where I was comfortable enough to express myself, and that's one of my major regrets. I'd look back on it now, and with 10 years more experience, 15 years more experience, I'd probably, you know, I'd care less. And that's a real bold statement to say I'd care less. Not care less about being the best I could be, but like care less about what people thought of us and really go for it.
What support mechanisms were in that time when you were transitioning from academy to scholarship to reserves to first team?
There was nothing really in place at the club as such. There was nobody who really like put their arm around you and said, look, how are you finding moving from here to there or anything like that. I guess the support mechanisms I drew upon was family. Like I said, my dad was obviously a big part of my journey. But even then, it was still difficult to have conversations with him to turn around and say, look, Dad, I'm pretty fearful of, you know, people having a go at us or this, that, and the other. So it wasn't really something I ever wanted to admit to.
Did you admit it to yourself?
Yeah, I always knew I was like a nervous type of character when it came to playing. I didn't want to let anyone down, didn't want to let myself down, I didn't want to, you know, make mistakes, be perceived as, you know, not very good. But yeah, and don't get us wrong, like it was the best period of my life ever. and I wouldn't swap it for the world. It's memories that I look back on and think, wow, did I really do that? Did I really get to play for the first team in pre-season friendlies? Did I really play at St James's in reserve fixtures? Or it's quite a big thing when you look back on it.
It's massive.
But in that moment, like I said before, you don't really know any different, and you kind of just going through the motions. And that's probably another one of my regrets, to be honest. Like I mentioned before, physically wasn't great, didn't get around the pitch very quickly, but at the time I did nothing about it. I didn't go in the gym early to get stronger, to allow us to become quicker. I didn't stay behind too often later on. And those are things like, I'm telling other people to do. Didn't really do them myself, but in hindsight, I know that it's really important. So yeah.
So how did your journey in Newcastle ultimately come to an end?
I was released at 18. I could give you the sub story of how I had an injury, and then that was the end of it. But I kind of did have an injury.
But if it's a reality that happened, it's an important part of that story.
I was throughout my second year as a scholar, before I was hopefully transitioning to pro. I did have a few injuries which set us back, but the main thing was the reserve team manager at the time really liked us.
Yeah.
And then there was a change of manager, so Glenn Rudder got sacked. Consequence of that, the reserve team manager left. Somebody else came in. Sam Allardyce came in and managed the club, and he was big on sports science.
Yeah.
So fitness was a big part of it. GPS trackers, pre-season was mental. I remember the lads in the youth team went to Magaluf at the end of the first year, and we got back a week before pre-season. I was just expecting to be with the youth team. I thought I'd be all right. First day back, there was 3 who got called up to the first team to do pre-season, and he had this big speaker box and lines marked out on the pitch every 10 metres. And so there was James Milner, the fittest footballer known to man. And then there was me, Mark Bertram, and Jeremy, just flagging at the back. So I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done here? So first impressions, me blowing a gasket at the back of this running drill. Mark Bertram, who at the time was coming to the end of his career, and Jeremy, who everyone knows, didn't like a run. So straight away I'm in with these two guys thinking, oh my God, what's people going to think here? So yeah, when that all started to change, I kind of, it didn't really kick. I didn't really kick on from there. And if I'm completely honest, looking back on it, I was probably limited as a player. Technically, pretty good. Tactically, I understood the game, but physically, I wasn't under the demands really, especially in the Premier League. So came to about February time really, and I think 5 or 6 of the lads got called up to the first team, and there was 4 who were left at the academy. And we were thinking, all right, this is going to be the moment. So which way is it going? Are those 5 getting contracts, or us 4? So got pulled into the office at the academy. Someone who I'm actually good friends with now. Well, I say good friends, but keep in touch with generally now, and basically sat us down and said, look, technically, we like you, but physically you're never going to play in the Premier League. So we decided that, unfortunately, you're not going to get a pro contract. And at the time, as much as I've probably seen it coming, it's still you take a deep breath and a big swallow, and it kind of hits you. You think, right, I'm just going to compose myself and get out there. And it didn't really hit us properly until I spoke to my girlfriend at that time. And then when I have to tell my dad, and that other family as well, and you just think everything I've been known for, it's going to change.
Yeah.
So that social status thing that I mentioned before, you go from being Mark the footballer to just Mark again, and that transition is quite difficult. But luckily, like I said, I had good people around us that got us through it. Obviously, the girlfriend at the time is now my wife, and she was probably important for us in that moment. And then you go on to the whole thing that you do when you get released from a club. You go on trial to a few places, and unfortunately that didn't work out for me. and I was all set to sign for Gateshead. Who at the time, I think, Ian Bogie was the manager, and they were in the uni bond. So it was like a decent standard. They were going to pay us more money than what I was on. I mean, scholarships, I was like, happy days. And I was going to go to Sunderland University to go alongside. I was always pretty academic in any case, and I thought, right, the next step for me logically is to go and get a degree and then, move on to something else. So I was going to combine the two. And I got a phone call from Northumbria University, and the guy who was running the football program there, a guy called Paul Johnson, who's been a really close friend ever since. And he says, look, we've got an opportunity for you to come and play at Northumbria, continue your studies, so we'll pay for your degree fees, and we'll also give you a wage on top of that. I thought, well, if I could do it all at the same place, then why not give it a go? So yeah, I went straight from almost being released in the sort of April time, starting uni in the September time, where I did sport coaching and development degree. But the time I had playing football while I was doing that was like different class. It was brilliant. I had a team full of like-minded people who had been released from professional clubs and wanted to pursue the academic side, and were really gelled. Had a really good team.
So that Team North, I presume, yeah?
Yeah.
Was that playing in the books and playing in the Northern League, or just the Northern League?
Yeah, so it was probably the best exit route I could have wished for, in terms of we played in the University League.
Yeah.
And then we also played in the Northern League, so I was playing Wednesday, Saturday, training in between, and then fitting my studies around that. So it gave us an opportunity to continue doing something I loved, and I'd worked so hard to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
I was able to continue that. But the culture and the environment was slightly different. It was a lot more relaxed. It's Bucks games away. I don't know, you'd go to Loughborough, and then on the way back you'd be getting lashed up on the bus, and then straight out off the bus in the middle of Newcastle city centre in your tracksuit straight at the local nightclub. I think it was Mood at the time when I first started, and then it shifted to Blue Bamboo. So you go from things that were frowned upon in Newcastle, really don't really want to go out and get caught on the town. Actually, forget about that. The lads were straight out, so it was a little bit more relaxed. But you combined the academic side, which for me was the next step in my life, with still getting to play football at a good level and do something that I love.
How did you find the transition from playing Newcastle United to playing at Northumbria University in regards to the pressures that you're putting on yourself?
At Northumbria, I probably didn't put any pressure on myself at all, to be honest with you. I'd gone from I don't know, playing at St James's Park or wherever it was to playing, I don't know, Howden away was my first game. And there was, I don't know, 50 people there, and the pitch was minging. I'm probably in my head at the time, I was thinking, what on earth am I doing here? And I always remember my first ever game in the Northern League. It was Howden away, and we were winning 3-1. Howden was spending loads of money at the time. We were just young kids, just coming out of the pro game, most of them. We were winning 3-1, and I'm keeping the ball in the corner. And then this just giant of a blow came steaming behind and ploughed us. I've nearly gone through the hoardings on the side. And he leaned over the top of us, and he just says, "You ever do that again, I'll break the legs." It's needless to say, I just put the ball back on the corner spot, and I jumped back the halfway line. I thought, "Whoa, I'm not having any of this. This isn't for me." But yeah, soon learned that I had to find a way of dealing with it. It wasn't going to be through going around smashing people. It was probably just through not letting my mouth go, or
being a bit more savvy.
But also just not letting people close to us, just moving that ball as quick as I could. But yeah, Northern Leagues, it's interesting. It's loads of fun. There's lots of good players in there as well.
Yeah.
Especially the top clubs in Division 1. There's lots of good players. It's a really good standard. But yeah, I love my time doing that as well.
Yeah.